Graffiti in Roscoe Village, and how we can solve it. About the project. This was a school social studies project based on the problem of graffiti in Roscoe Village, Chicago. I live on a busy street, and for a long time there had been a viaduct in front of my house that got constantly covered in graffiti. Recently, however, it was torn down, sending all of the local graffiti artists to practice their work on buildings and even houses. One day, we noticed that someone had spray painted the word smug on our front door in orange ink. I hope that eventually the government will allow graffiti-sanctioned areas, which would give graffiti artists a place to express themselves without being vandals. My hypothesis. My hypothesis is that I can help solve the problem of graffiti by collecting data and then working off what I have learned. How I collected data. When the project was first assigned, I created a digital survey that I sent out to my classmates and neighbors, but I soon discovered that none of my classmates lived in the same neighborhood as me, and only a few of my neighbors even responded. I decided to try something new. I created a survey with 3 quick questions to ask strangers. Then, I stood outside a grocery store near my house and talked to people as they exited and entered. I also created a petition for graffiti-sanctioned zones that I asked people to sign. These were my survey questions. Number 1. Do you think graffiti is a problem in Roscoe Village? Number 2. Do you think graffiti in general has any artistic value? And number 3. Do you think there should be areas where graffiti is allowed? This was my data. 13 people thought graffiti is a problem in Roscoe Village. 24 people thought it isn't. 33 people thought graffiti does has artistic value. 7 people thought it doesn't. 33 people thought there should be areas where graffiti is allowed. 11 people thought there shouldn't. My analysis of my data. Most people answered either no to the first question and yes to the second or third, or yes to the first question and no to the second or third. This makes sense because the people who answered no to the first question and yes to the second and third are obviously totally okay with graffiti and they totally like it. The people who answered yes to the first question and no to the second and third obviously don't like graffiti and won't tolerate it at all. Out of the 44 people that were interviewed, 33 were in agreement with my idea, the idea of having areas where graffiti is allowed. Some of the people that I interviewed replied, it depends on some of the questions, so even though I interviewed 44 people, each question might not have 44 responses. My conclusion. In this project, I got to talk to a lot of different types of people who all had opinions on graffiti. To my surprise, most people actually said that they didn't have a problem with graffiti, and then they even enjoy looking at it. Although, almost everyone had one thing in common. They all thought that graffiti-sanctioned zones were a great idea. People who like seeing graffiti can go there to look at it, and people who don't like it don't have to see it wherever they go. I started collecting signatures for this, and I'll eventually have enough to take the petition to an alderman. The end.